Imagine a voting map so bizarrely drawn that one single district looks literally like a giant lobster stretching hundreds of miles across the state.
Yeah, it paints quite a picture in your mind. And honestly, when you actually look at it on paper, it really does look like it has claws and a tail.
It's wild. But, this isn't just some funny drawing we found on the internet.
Hmm.
On Tuesday, April 21, 2026, Virginia voters faced this sudden, incredibly high-stakes special election that could literally reshape the United States Congress.
Right.
We're talking about a brand new constitutional amendment placed on the ballot by the General Assembly. They want to temporarily take back the power to draw congressional districts.
And if voters approve it, it triggers a new map that could instantly flip 4 U.S. House seats.
4 seats. I mean, this single state election has drawn millions of dollars, massive national attention, and multiple intense court battles.
The stakes here really couldn't be higher for the whole country.
So we need to unpack all of this. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a massive stack of sources
A
today.
huge step.
Yeah, we're looking at an academic paper on Virginia's 2021 redistricting reforms, some incredibly dense legal filings for the democracy docket, a CNN article, fresh polling data, and comprehensive notes on this April 2026 amendment.
And our mission here is really to figure out exactly how Virginia got to this breaking point, what these proposed maps look like, and the fierce arguments from both sides.
But before we jump in, we have to be crystal clear with you about something. Because this touches the third rail of American politics, these sources contain highly politically charged content.
Oh, very charged, from both left-wing and right-wing perspectives.
Exactly. So we are not taking a side here. We don't endorse either viewpoint. We're just your impartial guides walking you through the facts and the math found in the source material.
Just laying it all out on the table for you.
Right. So to really understand why this new map is causing such an earthquake, we first need to look at the baseline, the map it actually replaces.
We have to wind the clock back to 2020, which was a massive year for voting reform in Virginia.
What happened in 2020?
Well, 65% of Virginia voters approved a constitutional amendment to end partisan gerrymandering.
Wow. 65% is a huge majority.
It's massive. They essentially took the map drawing power away from the politicians and gave it to a new bipartisan redistricting commission.
Okay, but, politicians being politicians, that commission ran into trouble pretty much immediately, didn't it?
Yeah, they hit a total wall. By 2021, the commission deadlocked. They just couldn't agree on a single map.
So what happens then? Does the whole thing just fall apart?
No, the law actually had a backup plan. The state constitution required the Supreme Court of Virginia to step in.
Judges. But judges aren't map makers. They do law, not geography.
Exactly. So they brought in outside experts. The court appointed 2 special masters to do the heavy lifting.
Basically independent map-making nerds.
Yeah, independent nerds. And the most fascinating part is they completely ignored incumbency. They didn't care about protecting any politician's job.
That is so rare.
It is. They just looked at population density, geography, and keeping communities together.
And the statistics on that 2021 map are incredible when you read the sources.
Yeah.
Like, it split only 10 counties, a total of 11 times across the entire state.
Which is highly compact.
Right. And the result was a highly competitive congressional delegation. Right now, Virginia has 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans in the U.S. House.
Which mirrors the actual voting patterns of the state perfectly.
I mean, I like to think about it like this. It's like taking the carving knife away from the hungry players at a dinner table and giving it to a neutral referee.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. The referee slices the pie based purely on math and geometry. No one gets a massive slice just because they happen to sit at the head of the table.
And that neutral referee is just following the strict rules of the state constitution.
Yeah.
Because the Virginia Constitution explicitly requires voting districts to be compact.
Right, which means they shouldn't look like crazy sprawling shapes.
Exactly.
Okay, but this raises the obvious question. If that 2021 map was widely praised as fair, creating a competitive 6-5 split, why is there an emergency special election to change it right now?
Well, that brings us to the sudden 2026 proposal. Democrats in the General Assembly passed an amendment to temporarily regain those map drawing powers until 2030.
And they didn't just ask for the power, they already drew the map. It's called House Bill 29.
Yep. If the voters say yes on April 21st, that pre-drawn map instantly takes effect.
And the statistics here are a huge shift. We just talked about that 6-5 split. But based on 2025 election data, this new map shifts that to a massive 10-1 Democratic advantage.
A 10-1 advantage in a battleground state.
10 to 1. How do you even mathematically do that?
You do it through two map-making strategies called packing and cracking.
Packing and cracking. Explain that.
So you pack as many of your opponent's voters as possible into one single district. They win that district by like 90%, but they've wasted all those extra votes.
Right. They run up the score in one place.
Exactly. Then you crack their remaining voters, spreading them thinly across multiple other districts where your party has a safe majority.
Ah. And let's look at the physical map they drew, because this is where the lobster comes back in.
The Lobster, right?
According to the sources, this new map takes Fairfax and Prince William counties, which are dense, deep blue suburbs near Washington, D.C., and it slices them 5 different ways.
5 ways.
Yeah. And then it connects those suburban slices with distant, conservative rural areas way down in the Shenandoah Valley.
And opponents actually have a very specific name for this. They call it bacon-mandering.
Bacon-mandering?
Yeah. Imagine taking long strips of bacon and laying them across a map. You lay narrow strips of highly populated suburban areas across massive rural regions.
So the sheer volume of suburban voters always outweighs the rural voters.
Every single time.
That's pretty wild. But let's talk about the actual math of the shades, because the Virginia Constitution legally requires districts to be compact. How do you measure that?
Map makers use a formula called a REOC score.
REOC. How does that work?
It's actually pretty simple to visualize. Imagine drawing the smallest possible perfect circle that entirely surrounds a voting district.
Okay, drawing a circle around it.
Right. The REOC score just measures how much of that circle the district actually fills up. So a perfect circle is a 1.0.
And a long squiggly line.
Drops way down near 0.
So what are the numbers here?
Well, the independent 2021 map had an average REOC score of 0.383.
Okay.
This new proposed map drops that score down to 0.265.
Wow. That's a huge drop.
It is. According to the democracy docket filings, that makes it the least or second least compact map in the entire country.
So I have to ask, if you're a lawmaker defending a map that looks like a lobster tentacle stretching hundreds of miles, how does that pass the constitutional test for being compact?
Well, that's exactly what's causing such a massive fight. We really have to look at the fierce arguments from both sides here.
Right. Let's start with the left wing, the Democratic argument. How are they pitching this to the voters?
They are framing this as a necessary emergency measure to restore fairness nationwide.
Nationwide. So they're looking outside of Virginia?
Exactly. They point out that Republican legislatures in states like Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina ruthlessly redrew their own maps mid-decade.
Oh, to lock in their own political power.
Right. So the Democratic argument is that Virginia cannot unilaterally disarm. They say, look, you have to fight fire with fire.
So if the other side is doing it in their states, we have to do it in ours to keep the national balance of power even.
That's the core of their pitch. And they also heavily stress that this is only temporary.
Temporary? How temporary?
They point out that the power automatically returns to the bipartisan commission in 2030. So it's just a short-term fix.
Okay, but wait. I have to push back on that temporary argument.
Go for it.
If this map passes, it governs the 2026 election, the 2028 election, and the 2030 election.
Right, 3 cycles.
That is a half decade. If you live in one of these sliced-up districts, your representation is locked in for 5 years. Does the word temporary really mean anything to a voter at that point?
And that pushback is exactly the foundation of the right-wing Republican argument against the map. They aren't buying the temporary label at all.
What are they calling it?
They're calling it an extreme partisan power grab. The opponents argue it's a display of brass-knuckled hypocrisy.
Because of the 2020 vote.
Yes. They point out that just 6 years ago, 65% of voters explicitly demanded a nonpartisan process. And this just completely overrides that vote.
And what about the physical map itself, the bacon-mandering?
They hate it. They argue it purposely dilutes the voices of rural voters. By connecting rural agricultural areas to Washington, D.C. suburbs, the rural voters just get drowned out.
I mean, it's forcing people with completely different lives into the same political bucket. You know, different economic needs, different infrastructure.
Exactly. And legally, they argue it flagrantly violates the state constitution's rule about compactness. You just can't justify a lobster shape under the law.
So, because the stakes involve total control of a state's congressional delegation, this didn't just stay a polite debate, right? This went straight to the courthouses.
Oh, it triggered absolute legal chaos. Republicans sued immediately.
On what grounds?
First, they argued the General Assembly broke procedural rules by passing it during a special session. But the bigger issue was the ballot language itself.
Oh, let's look at that language, because what you read in the voting booth really matters.
It does. The ballot asks voters if they want to temporarily adopt new maps to restore fairness.
Restore fairness. I mean, that sounds great. Who doesn't want fairness?
Exactly. But Republicans argued that phrasing is incredibly misleading. It doesn't actually tell the voter that the mechanism for this fairness is suspending the independent commission they literally voted for in 2020.
Did the courts agree with that?
Well, a judge in Tazewell County actually did. He agreed and halted the election multiple times.
Wow, just stop the election preparation.
Yeah, he said the language was designed to steer the voters, not inform them. But
Let me guess, higher courts got involved.
yes, the Virginia Supreme Court consistently stepped in. They stayed the lower court's rulings and allowed the April 21 vote to proceed.
So the election is happening no matter what.
It's happening.
What does the polling look like? Are the voters buying the restore fairness argument or the power grab argument?
It is incredibly tight. The State Navigate polling shows about 53% support.
Okay, so slightly passing.
But then you look at Heritage Action polling, and that shows 45% support and 36% oppose.
That leaves a massive chunk of undecided voters.
Huge. It's a true toss-up right now.
You know, reading through all this, voting in this election feels like playing a sports match where the referees are actively arguing over the rule book while the ball is already in the air.
That is exactly what it feels like. The legal foundation of the map is still being argued, but the voters are already casting their ballots.
It's just a total whiplash of legal maneuvering and ticking clocks.
Right.
So as we wrap up, we want to connect this back to you, the listener, because you might be sitting there thinking, I don't live in Virginia. Why should I care about this?
But you should care, because this deep dive shows how complex legal mechanisms and local ballot measures in a single state can dictate the balance of power for the entire country.
Exactly. It proves that local elections matter globally.
A single referendum on a random Tuesday in April could literally decide who controls the U.S. House of Representatives.
And by extension, what laws get passed for the whole nation. So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on today.
Okay, what is it?
If every state decides they have to fight fire with fire, bypassing their own anti-gerrymandering laws to counteract whatever the other side is doing, what does the future of the American electoral map actually look like?
Or are we just moving toward a country where the lines are redrawn constantly based purely on whoever holds the pen?
Right. Something to think about the next time you look at a voting district, especially if it happens to look like a giant lobster stretching across your state.